Hey everybody, I'm Andrea Howard and I am the chair of the quantitative methods section of the Canadian Psychological Association. And I'm here with my friend and colleague, Oscar Olvera Estivia. Please introduce yourself, Oscar.
Hello, everybody. My name is, full name is Oscar Lorenzo Olvera Estivia, but you can just call me Oscar. And I'm the Director of Communications of the Quantitative Methods section of the Canadian Psychological Association. I'm currently appointed at the University of South Florida down in Tampa.
And I'm at Carleton University in the Department of Psychology. And Oscar and I have been talking about getting together to talk about quantitative methods in Canada. And it was your idea. I think this is a great idea. We are, a bit little known, right? I mean, our section is
Exactly.
relatively small.
It's a small but mighty. I always consider it a section, but you're right. We do. Sometimes I feel when we compare ourselves, particularly with psychology being such a huge area, there's a need for a bit more of a presence. I feel that I think we can both foster, or we can foster as a community in general, but at least we're trying to take a first step.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we're just kind of getting together here to talk to each other and talk to everybody out there, just to introduce ourselves. So, quantitative psychology is a subdomain of psychology, just like any other. Like, we have social psych and developmental psych and cognitive psych. So Oscar and I thought, well, let's talk about, what does it mean to be a quantitative psychologist? And, is that something that somebody out there might want to be if they don't already know about it? Yeah. What's a quantitative psychologist to you, Oscar?
Well, that's a super interesting question. I thought maybe I should have gotten this was ready because the APA has an official definition, right, of a quantitative psychology person is, which is essentially a psychologist by training who has a specialty on the statistical tools, the methodological approaches, like sort of the process that makes psychological science, I guess, a science in a quantitative sense, right? Because this, of course, the qualitative perspective to psychology. But definitely is sort of this particular or interesting hybrid, I feel, of a person who is familiar, of course, with the discipline of scientific psychology, but brings in this section or this side that's a little bit more statistical, or maybe if you specialize in measurements, more psychometric, or which pertains to the process of, at least to me, transforming psychological data or psychological inquiry into something that is amenable for some sort of quantitative discourse. Like, what would you say it's a quantitative psychologist?
Yeah, so the quantitative psychologists that I know and talk to sometimes bristle at the idea that we just do the statistics and the rest of psychology is the side with the real ideas. So I think of quantitative psychology as the scientific study of the measurement tools and methodologies that we use to answer questions of interest to psychology and social sciences in general, I guess. So it's its own content area, although I think a lot of the time people think of it as a tack on, and that's not necessarily true, right?
Yeah, no, it's now full disclosure. I do have to say I'm not a psychologist by training. I come from an education department, which is, of course, I feel an interesting conversation that it could even have in the future of so what is this relationship that we have? Because if you see, I think our biggest professional organizations, the APA for psychologists and the ARA for people who do educational research, if you look at, so what's APA Division 5, I believe, that's in charge of methods and statistics. What I love about this is just the irony that ARA has all of this information about quantitative psychology programs, and APA has all of this information about educational measurement programs. Yet we somehow exist into this hybrid, like we're different but not the same, but we're kind of the same thing, but we operate in different faculties with different systems. But at the core, I think that there is this principle that binds us all together, which is this idea of let's try to figure out these how to answer these questions, whether they pertain more to the statistical aspect or the applied aspect, but from a quantitative point of view.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that kind of overlap because I developed an interest myself in quantitative methods during my PhD in developmental psychology. Like I did a PhD in developmental psychology at the University of Alberta. And I kind of came in thinking like, yeah, I really like the stats part of it. It's really interesting. You kind of get these, like numerical answers to questions about human behavior. And that's kind of fascinating. So, after taking kind of the required courses, I said, well, what else is there? And in psych, we didn't have any else. There was just the first couple of years, but I heard from this student or that student, like, oh, there's some other stuff. There's a guy over in sociology who teaches structural equation modeling, and that turned out to be Les Haydock. And as far as I know, he still teaches it over there. And then after that, I learned that there was an educational measurement program in the ed psych unit at the university. So I took like 3 classes there. I think I took multivariate statistics. I took classical test theory, item response theory. So in terms of formal training, I got more classes outside of psychology than inside of psychology. And then kind of I came to quantitative psychology as a part of my professional identity, through my graduate training and then going to a postdoc at the University of North Carolina, where there was an actual quantitative sub-area formally organized.
I kind of like these origin story of Dr. Andrew Howard. So you started off then as in developmental psych, and then sort of.
And I still identify. Yeah, like I still identify as a developmental psychologist, but I also identify as a quantitative psychologist.
Yeah, so.
And it's funny, like, can I claim that identity? I don't know. I think that's something people struggle with. How good do you have to be at stats before you get to say you're a quantitative psychologist, right? How many classes do you have to teach? How much data do you have to simulate before you get to say you're a quantitative psychologist? So I don't think there's an answer. I think, it's other than clinical psych, all that you get in terms of a designation is your PhD in psychology. So if I want to say I'm a developmental psychologist, it's not because I had a special blessing, right? It's because that was the topic area that I studied in and stuck with. So I think it's reasonable to also claim it for quantitative methods.
Yeah, no, it's the thing is, I always kind of bring this as an origin story because for people out there who are not familiar with our fields of inquiry, like a running joke that I think we all have is that most of us stumble upon this field while looking for something else. Right, like
yeah.
Which is at least what I also get from your story. You sort of like as you're progressing as a developmental psych, sort of this thing came into your perspective, and then just kind of started taking it like a greater and greater detour. It's like, oh, I kind of like it. Mine must. Because I come from a background in math. Like I always thought I was going to become an actuary because actuarial sciences, like this idea of modeling risk and I like numbers and computer and all these kind of geeky things. But when I started my master's in actuarial sciences at Simon Fraser University, because at least within BC it's one of the places where you can start taking the actuarial exams, because you have to go through I think 4 or 5 exams before you can license yourself as an actuary and start working as an actuary. So I went through the first exam, and the person who at that point was supervising me, like they kind of pulled me over and said like, hey, I mean, you're good at what you do, but you're gonna hate this profession because your personality, like there's nothing wrong with it.
You can't be a nice person.
Exactly, but you're all about these, like why these, why that, of course, because you see the actuarial tables and everything, and I'm like, yeah, but what about the people? What about what are they doing, or why do these clusters of risk manifest themselves? That result in this or that. Like we don't ask those kinds of questions. That's more of a social science type approach. And my supervisor was actually the one who told me like there exists this thing out there within psychology departments was the first thing. I don't know who to contact. I don't know what to do. But if you go meet with the people of the theory and methods section, so to speak, in SFU, you might get more information out of it. I then got to meet with the SFU people, but I met with the UBC people. And that's where I met both Dr. Victoria Savali and Dr. Bruno Zumbo, which is how I ended and said, like, yes, this offers me this perfect mix of, like, if I want to be, very rigorous, very equation-y, very X's and Y's, but if I also want to be like, no, let's think about, like, the deeper questions. What does it mean to measure people, right? Because it's kind of controversial, and that's sort of like, okay, at least there seems to be a field of inquiry that tries to balance these approaches, but as you correctly pointed out, I think the strength that we have is that we welcome a lot of diverse perspectives, so that you don't actually you don't just have to be like a statistician with some hints of psychology. You can be more of a psychologist with the hints of statistics and still work with something that we could consider quant psych or ed measurement or something like that.
Yeah, I think, from that perspective, quantitative psychology is extremely inclusive, right? It's despite what people might assume, it's not like a club. You have to pay a membership fee to join, or you have to kind of prove yourself with your coding skills. It is for everybody. And if you feel like you want to take on a project that's really quantitatively oriented, we certainly in the section here want to encourage that, and we want, more involvement and more voices. So we are interested in kind of doing some of these chats that are not too long, right? We're trying to keep it short. So
people, into the idea of what we do.
Yeah. So in future future conversations, we're going to try and do some things like maybe do the odd tutorial on a particular topic that might be of interest. Might talk about some career issues, grant writing stuff.
Maybe bring some of our colleagues, like a little bit of an intro. Yeah. And we have a lot of big names, like, in the field, in Canada, people who have, I feel, created a very distinct impact, not just in our discipline, but has translated itself to other disciplines as well, which is one of the things I appreciate. And like listening to them, having this type of conversations, I feel at least my hope with this is that we'll at least find someone at some point who has an undergrad in psych, in social sciences, say like, you know what? I like those quant psych people. I like those ed measurement people. Let's see what they're all about, when we get to graduate school. Yeah. So that, stuff.
If we're talking to, undergrads out there, people in psychology that have an interest, you're probably not at a university that has a quantitative area, right? We have in Canada, we've both checked, there are 6 universities that grant PhDs in quantitative psychology, like psychology, specifically quantitative sub-area, or educational psychology for like educational measurement, psychometrics, like those. So 6 universities. Let's see if we can actually do them off the top of their heads. All right. So UBC.
So UBC has 2, right? So because they had the measurement.
And the MERM
psych.
As well.
Then SFU has the psych. U Alberta, I believe, has ed measurement. U Manitoba has a psych program. Then we start with the big ones. York University has quant psych. McGill has quant psych. Carleton has.
No, I don't claim us yet. I'm like a steward of quantitative psychology in my department, but there are tons of departments out there with a person like me where it's sort of we're doing the work, but we don't have a formal sub area, and we don't have students trying to complete PhDs in quantitative psych. We do have like a concentration for the PhD program that's mostly coursework based in independent study, but we're not a full-fledged quantitative area yet. Maybe someday, right? So that's.
If we do that, then it's. Because the
well, you counted UBC twice.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so there's 6 then. Only 2 programs have.
So So this is the section is trying to kind of bring this smallness to the rest of the country and maybe try and embiggen us a little bit. So that's what we're going to try and do, right? I'm looking forward to having another one of these chats. We'll talk offline about exactly what that's going to be. That's something I hope we can all look forward to. And while we're talking about this, we'll be preparing to put this video log on our brand new website, which by the time you've seen this video, you've probably been there. Oscar developed it for us. It's CanadianQuantPsych.ca. Am I right?
Yeah, CanadianQuantPsych.ca,
Yeah.
Exactly. And hopefully will be a little bit of our little hub of all things quantitative with a Canadian twist to it, to sort of like learn of our field and whatnot. And I think that this is a great time to jump into quantitative psychology or educational measurement and whatnot. Like, for better or worse, the replicability crisis has highlighted the importance of methodology and the role that it plays in psychology and education and social sciences. And well, we are some of the people who are, I feel, best qualified to speak to these issues, because that's the training that we have been receiving for 10 years plus. And the second is just like the wide availability of data these days. There's everything produces, collects data, and well, as the data needs increase, I feel like we're not keeping up demand with the kind of people who are able to not just analyze it but also make sense of it. Because I mean, if anybody can just run data through whatever machine learning algorithm of choice and then wait and see what comes out on the other end. But being able to sort of keep the scientific perspective, the scientific discipline of it, is something that I believe requires a more careful training about, okay, if you have measurement error, what does that mean? If you have if you have these types of missing data, where do they come from? It's not just missing data. So I do tell people, of all the time in history, this is an excellent time to start kind of asking these type of questions and maybe considering these disciplines if they happen to be of your favor.
Yeah, I think psychologists are uniquely well qualified to be quantitative people, right? Because you bring that to the table, right? If you know that when you throw a bunch of variables into a model, it's simplistic to say we adjusted for all of that, right? It's just we adjusted for it, it no longer matters. Well, no, it does matter what hidden moderators are in there, right? What exactly have you factored in from a behavioral perspective, from a societal perspective, right? That's not going to be as handled as well by somebody who has not been trained in a social science discipline. So yeah, it's a great time to train in quantitative psych. It's a great time to pivot your research program to quantitative stuff if you're looking down the barrel of your dissertation that's ruined from COVID and thinking like, maybe I need to discover an analytic technique to focus my research on from an existing data set. That's out there waiting to be discovered.
Oh no, definitely, because we do sort of have these. We probably have time to discuss it some other day, but is this idea that's wonderfully captured in an article by Danny Borsum called "The Attack of the Psychometricians." I don't know if you've ever read of that.
No,
it's a wonderful paper. I always ask my students to read it because it's, even though it's published in Psychometrica, which has all the integrals and the x's and the y's.
Those are hard to read.
It's a wonderful piece because I think it very succinctly, and it's not new, it's been around for a few years, summarizes some of the issues between what's now or usually referred to content or applied or empirical psychology and the more methodology quantitative psychology. And essentially is this problem of they run in parallel sometimes. So we talk to do our things. Every now and then, some of these things that methodologists talk about filter through when we talk about an applied research. But there's this wealth of interesting methodological issues that applied researcher or people from content areas have that doesn't always filter back to quantitative methods. So having this ability to converse and say, hey, there is something out there like QuantPsych, like Get Measurement, that tries to bring those two together. Helps with, COVID-19 got you down. It's like, no problems. There's perhaps a few methods here or certain assumptions that you can make to at least try to get you to some sensible conclusions. Because at the end of the day, it's all about, I think, trying to make a scientifically justified argument of the research question or a scientifically justified answer that they're trying to come up with, as opposed to get data, go through, need to like R, SAS, SPSS, your software of choice, and p-values came out, right? Like, data comes in, p-values come out, and having more of these idea of what it means to like converse and talk about these issues. So we're definitely looking forward to highlighting this more in the future.
I think that's a fantastic place to end off for the day, and we'll hope to come back. If you like what you hear so far, everybody, there's more to come. Oscar and I like to talk. We're going to try and keep our talks short so that we don't interfere too much with your day, and we'll look forward to posting something up again pretty soon. And thanks for joining us.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good day.